Yo, what is going on, everybody? Thank you for clicking on this video. Today we're going to be going over the top 30 running backs for week 11 of fantasy football. I recently just released my wide receiver ranking video, so if you haven't seen that yet, make sure to go check that out. Also, drop a like on this video, leave a comment, and if you got any questions about anything, subscribe to the channel. I got content coming all year for y'all. First off, just want to go over the players that are on bye week. So we got Kenneth Walker, Travis Etienne, Leonard Fournette, Raheem Mostert, and Jeff Wilson. So obviously none of those guys will be mentioned here. A couple injury situations to take notice of as well. We got Khalil Herbert got put on bye, so David Montgomery will be ranked higher obviously than he has been. It also seemed like Zeke was going to play last week, but he ended up not, so we don't really know at this point if he's going to, so stay tuned throughout the week. If you have questions as more information comes out, just like I said, leave in the comments down below and I'll get back to you. I am going to have him and Tony Pollard both ranked, but I'm kind of assuming that Zeke is somewhat limited, but just really hard to know at this point. And we also have to monitor what's going on with Gus Edwards and Kenyon Drake. I do assume that Gus is going to be back this week, but I think that Kenyon Drake will still have a role just given how well he's performed. So they're probably right outside the top 30 if they're both playing. If Gus misses, then Kenyon Drake would probably be somewhere in the 20s. All right, with all of that housekeeping out of the way, let's get into the rankings. So first up, we're going to have Saquon Barkley, just been absolutely dominating this year. The entire offense runs through him, and they're going up against Detroit, which is a really easy matchup, so not much to really be said. The next person I'm going to have at my running back 2 is going to be Derrick Henry. Going up against Green Bay, it's been a pretty easy matchup for running backs. He really struggled last week, which definitely not normal to see, but I don't have any reason to be worried about him. So I think he's going to keep being a top 3 at least option every single week, so playing with confidence. And the last guy I'm going to have in this tier is going to be Austin Eckler going up against Kansas City. Kansas City's actually been a relatively tough matchup for running backs. A lot of that was probably due to they have to throw the ball so much. A lot of that's probably due to the fact that teams have to throw the ball so often when they're playing against them, since there's so many points being put up. And Austin Eckler, regardless, is somebody's matchup proof and is used a lot in the passing game, so nothing to really be worried about here. And they're going to have to be using him a lot to be in this game. We may get Keenan Allen and Mike Williams back. They should be at practice this week, so don't really know how that would affect Eckler. I think he would still be heavily involved, and the entire offense might just be better, which would be better for Eckler. And next up, my running back 4, I'm going to have Jonathan Taylor, who we finally saw a bounce back week for him. Looked like himself. Crazy that came with Jeff Saturday, and I assume that he's pretty much healthy now and they're just going to keep getting him more and more involved. So should be kind of back to who Jonathan Taylor was supposed to be. I mean, I hope so. They're also playing Philadelphia this week, which is a good defense, but they've actually been pretty friendly to running backs over the past 4 weeks. So I think that this should be another opportunity for Jonathan Taylor to be solid. So I'm playing him if I got him. Next up, my running back 5, I'm going to have Christian McCaffrey. Definitely a bit of a down week for him last week, but we still saw him get in the end zone, which was nice to see. But with Elijah Mitchell back, it definitely seemed to be that both of them were getting a lot of work, and I do think that's going to continue. This is pretty common with a lot of the Niners players, just since it's not a super high powered offense, like volume wise, and there's so many talented weapons, not every single person going to be great every single week, but we still saw 20 opportunities for Christian McCaffrey, and if he's getting that volume every single week, then I'm not worried about him at all. So top 5 play for me this week. And at my running back 6, I'm going to have Nick Chubb. He's going up against Buffalo this week, which have actually given up the 5th most points to fantasy running backs over the past 4 weeks, and it looks like this game there's going to be a ton of snow and really high winds, so just better for the run game, I think, overall. Definitely a little bit worried about that weather just for the game in total, but I still think that Nick Chubb should be fine. So I'm got him here, my running back 6, and the last guy in tier 2. And then on to my running back 7. To start off tier 3, I'm going to have Joe Mixon, who's going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who over the past 4 weeks have actually given up the 3rd least amount of points to running back. So actually a pretty tough matchup for him. They're coming off the bye, and the week before that, he scored 50 points, had 5 touchdowns. I mean, honestly, one of like the 10 best fantasy performances ever by a skill position player. And he's obviously going to be still a massive part of this offense, but this is a little bit tougher of a matchup, so I didn't put him up into tier 2, but still going to be a top 10 option that everybody should be playing. Next up, my running back 8, I'm going to have Dalvin Cook, who had a pretty good week last week, scored an 81-yard touchdown, which will always save your day, but besides that, wasn't too great, but really showed out in overtime too. So I just hope that they keep getting him more involved, because whenever they get him going, which if he gets the ball a lot, he's going to get going, it just seems to help out their offense a lot, and he's still super talented, but just like I've talked about other weeks, not as utilized as he has been the previous years, so doesn't have the same upside, but still going to be a top 10 running back 1 option every week. And the last guy in this tier is going to be Josh Jacobs, who's going up against Denver. Denver is one of the best defenses in the NFL, but where they can be attacked is in their run game, although they did shut down Derrick Henry last week, which is definitely worrisome. So it's going to have to monitor that going forward to see if their defense is turning it around in the run game, because before that was someone where you could attack them, but they looked a lot better last week. But Josh Jacobs also had a bounce back week, which is good to see, and I think that they're going to have to to keep on relying on him, but he might not be that top 5 fantasy option that we thought he was a couple weeks ago, but still I think going to be a top 10 option rest of the season. And next up, I'm going to have Alvin Kamara, who's really struggled the past 2 weeks, but that's really just because the offense has struggled. He's still been out there a lot and has looked like himself, but the offense has just had a bunch of 3 and outs over and over again, and they've really been struggling. Played Baltimore and Pittsburgh the last 2 weeks, and Pittsburgh had TJ Watt back, and we talked about that a bit with Joe Mixon, where their defense is a lot better than it has been. They're going up against the LA Rams this week, which is another good defense, but another defense that can be attacked by their running backs. They've given up the 8th most points to running backs over the past 4 weeks, so it should be a decent option. I'm hoping personally that they put James out there because I think it'll help the offense overall, and if the offense is doing better, then it's going to be better for Kamara because there'll be more opportunity. He's still out there for 80% of all the snaps, and we saw just a couple weeks ago he scored 3 touchdowns and looked like himself, so we still know he's the same guy. The offense just isn't what we need it to be right now, and hopefully they'll be able to turn it around, but for right now I got him here in my tier 4. And after him, my running back 11, we're going to have Aaron Jones. Really showed out last week against Dallas, which is a tough defense. Was on the field for 70% of the snaps and got 26 opportunities, turned it into 22.6 fantasy points in half PPR. I mean, he still looks like one of the best running backs in the NFL. They just don't utilize him like they should every single week. But when they do, it seems like it really helps out the team a lot. Christian Watson also balled out, so hopefully that can kind of spark them. And if the offense can get going, then it'll be better for Aaron Jones because he still has that crazy upside that we've seen this year. But because the offense has sputtered a lot, it hurts him and he can have a lot of low floors, but she's always been known to have, but it just hurts more this year because the offense still isn't good. But regardless, because of his upside, he needs to be kind of played every single week. Tough matchup against Tennessee this week, but if he gets opportunity, I think he should be just fine. And after him, we're going to have Ramondre Stevenson going up against the New York Jets, also coming off of a bye week. I do think we should pay attention to what's going on here because coming off a bye week, Damian Harris will be more healthy, and if this is another situation where Ramondre Stevenson just gets all of the snaps like he has been, even with Damian Harris back, then it is 100% his backfield, and he's not probably going to lose it. This is a relatively tough defense, but Ramondre Stevenson, if he's getting that workhorse workload, then he's going to be just fine against pretty much any defense. Really good pass catcher and just a really great talent that probably playing if you got him. So I got him here in my running back 12. Next up, we're going to have Dameon Pierce, who's going up against the Washington Commanders, who over the past 4 weeks have been the hardest matchup for running back. So definitely a little bit worried about him. And because he's not totally utilized in the passing game, that can definitely hurt him. They also just signed Benjamin, who I think will probably take over a lot of the Rex Burkhead role, but he's still going to get at least 20 touches, probably more every single week. And he's shown that he's a really good talent. So if he can keep that up, even against a tough defense, I think he should be just fine. And the last guy I'm going to have in this tier is going to be Miles Sanders going up against Indianapolis Colts. Had a pretty down week last week, but he's one of those guys where if he doesn't score a touchdown, you're probably not going to be that happy with because he's not being utilized very much in the receiving game. But he is the clear lead back here still, and it is a great offense, just struggled last week. And they did play Washington, which I just talked about is the hardest defense over the past month. And they're playing Indianapolis, which is also a good defense, but they're more middle of the road, so I'm not too worried about it. Still going to be a decent option for everybody this week. Now moving on to my tier 5, I'm going to have James Conner to start it off. Going up against San Francisco, which is one of the toughest matchups for running backs. But his first week back, we saw 70% of the snaps, and then last week saw 96% of the snaps, and then they cut, and he also got 2 touchdowns last week. So obviously sitting out and getting healthy helps him a lot. He looks great again. Hopefully Colt McCoy or Kyler Murray is starting this week because that'll help the offense out a lot. Regardless though, getting 96% of the snaps and basically all the opportunity, gonna want to be playing James Conner if you got him. And after him, we're gonna have David Montgomery. Like I talked about, Khalil Herbert got put on the IR, so we should be getting all of the volume. They're also playing the Atlanta Falcons, which is a pretty easy matchup for the running backs. So hopefully he should have a bounce back week because he's really struggled over the past couple. Justin Fields has also been taking like all of the rushing work away. So who knows if he'll keep getting 150 yards per game. He might, but I doubt it. So I think that this should be a decent spot for Monty to bounce back. After him, we're going to have Deonta Foreman, who had a really great week last week against Atlanta, who Montgomery's playing. His 2 big weeks have both been against them, and they're going up against Baltimore this week, which could be a lot tougher matchup. He's also kind of like a first, second down grinder and will get the end zone work, but Baltimore, they're probably going to be down, so I don't imagine that he'll be utilized quite the same way that he has been, but if there's any goal line work, he is going to get it, and he will still get a decent amount of volume, I imagine. We saw with Chuba back, it doesn't matter. He's still the clear lead back here, but I definitely am lowering my expectations from the past couple of weeks just because of the matchup. After him, we're going to have Jamal Williams, who is still the clear lead back in Detroit until DeAndre Swift gets fully healthy, but he said it might not be this entire year, so I don't really know what to do. until we see otherwise, Jamal Williams is going to keep on being ranked ahead of him. They're going up against the New York Giants, which actually have been one of the toughest running back matchups this year. But I think regardless, he's getting enough volume where he should probably be played as like this low-end running back too. Swift does seem to be working a little bit more back. They're hoping to get him more involved, but until I see it on the field, can't rank him any other way. And the last guy I got in this tier is going to be Antonio Gibson, who has looked really good the past couple of weeks. Got a little bit banged up last week in the game, but came back in, so I think he should be just fine. And they're going up against Houston, which is the easiest matchup for running backs. Has been all year, has been over the past month. Just an absolute smash play for all running backs. Now, he's only on the field for about half the snaps, but over the past month, he's getting almost 15 opportunities every single game and has really been converting them to a lot of work. Also being used a lot more in the receiving game is what we really always wanted to see from him. And now that Brian Robinson is getting a lot of the early grinding down work, he's being utilized a little bit more as a weapon, and it's honestly been a lot better for him. So I think we got to keep on playing him, especially with JD McKissic out. And against Houston, I think it's a good play for everybody. Honestly, I'm going to move Gibson ahead of Williams. All right, moving on to the next tier, I'm going to have Devin Singletary to start it off. Going up against Cleveland, which is also a really easy matchup for most running backs. But they are a part of that snow game that I was talking about earlier with Chubb, where it's going to be a massive blizzard with really high winds. So that should probably lead to more rushing work, which is going to be good for Singletary. But overall, there might just not be as many scoring opportunities, which is what he really kind of needs to be good for some fantasy, which he did score 2 touchdowns last week, which is great to see. And in the last 4 games, he's seen over 70% of the snaps. So if that can continue, I think he should be a good play for everybody. But given what this game might turn into, just a little bit lower than where he has been. All right, now after him, I'm going to have Tony Pollard. This is obviously assuming that Zeke is playing, but it's also assuming that Zeke is a little bit limited, so I have him ranked ahead. If Zeke isn't playing, then I'd probably put him up here, but under the assumption that he is, then I've got him right here for right now, because they've said many times when Zeke is back, they still go through him, so he's going to get a ton of work, but Tony Pollard is going to still be involved, and is such a freak athlete that he has opportunity to break plays, even on a limited amount of snaps, and I assume that his snaps are going to go up from what they were. And after him, I'm going to have Cordero Patterson. Really weird game. I mean, they didn't really use him that much last week, which is really weird to see. They're going up against Chicago too this week, which should be a good matchup for him. But if they're going to utilize him the same way, then he should be ranked a lot lower than this. I just kind of assume that's coming back from injury still, and he should get more ramped up. So we'll have to see that, but definitely a situation I want to monitor. And after him, we're going to have Najee Harris, who had his best rushing game of the season, but didn't really get utilized in the receiving game much and didn't get in the end zone, so wasn't that great for fantasy, but it was encouraging to see him actually have some explosive plays finally. Now, he is dealing with a bit of an injury, so that's another situation that we're going to want to monitor as the week goes on. And they're going up against Cincinnati, which is a really tough matchup for running backs, but I'm hoping that he can get back on track from what he started off with last week. And next, my running back 24 is where I have Ezekiel Elliott ranked. This is obviously assuming that he is a little bit limited. I don't know where he would be exactly if he was fully healthy, maybe just like a little bit above these guys. But for right now, I got him ranked here. I think that if he's playing, he's going to be utilized a decent amount. And if they're on the goal line, they're probably still going to use Zeke, so always have that touchdown opportunity, but definitely nothing I'm too excited about. And after him, I'm going to have Isaiah Pacheco, who looked really good last week. One of the biggest indicators for me that they really trust him is that he fumbled the ball and then went right back to him the next drive. They're also playing the Chargers, which have been one of the easiest matchups all year for running backs. And I think that Pacheco is really going to be good when they're going to be leading and running the ball a lot, which I do assume that's going to be this game. So I think that this could be a really good game for Pacheco, but obviously going to have some limited upside and a low floor given that he's not really utilized in the passing game at all. And the last guy I'm going to have in this tier is Brian Robinson. A lot of similar things I talked about with Antonio Gibson. Since JD McKissic is gone, it's just these two guys, and they utilize the running backs a ton. I mean, there was almost 40 touches to go between them last week. And they're playing Houston, which is one of the easiest matchups like I talked about. I think this should be another good opportunity for Brian Robinson to keep on building confidence in himself and have another good week for fantasy. And then to start off my tier 7, I'm at running back 27. I'm going to have DeAndre Swift going up against the New York Giants. I mean, it's really hard to have any faith in Swift at this point. He's barely being utilized, and he got stuffed on the goal line on what looked like should have been an easy touchdown. Luckily, he did come back and score another one, so he probably should have had 2 touchdowns, but only ended up with 7.7 fantasy points on 9 attempts, and he had a touchdown, which is really just tough to see for everybody, I think. So hopefully he can keep getting healthier and healthier, but we can't put him any higher until we see something on the field that indicates otherwise. After him, I'm going to have Michael Carter going up against New England, which is a tough matchup, but Carter has been pretty good this year. It will be interesting to see the split now between James Robinson and Michael Carter. I think Carter is going to be a little bit more valuable for fantasy since he seems to be more utilized in the passing game, but I think coming off this bye week, week, it should be a pretty good indicator of what's going to happen going forward, except New England's a really tough matchup, so that definitely gives me some worries. But for right now, I got him ranked right here, my running back 28. And after him, at my running back 29, I'm going to have Elijah Mitchell, who looked really good last week coming off of injury. He was only on the field for 35% of the snaps, but he saw 20 opportunities on those 35% of snaps, so it'll be really interesting to see what it's like going forward because he looked fantastic. But obviously they traded for Christian McCaffrey, and he's Christian McCaffrey. It's not like Mitchell's better than him or anything, but it could be nice to kind of take some of that volume and workload away from McCaffrey so he doesn't get hurt like he always has. I think that's kind of the idea here, but they probably should both be useful for fantasy though, since this is a ground heavy attack and they're both going to be utilized a lot. So I think you can probably play both of them. And going forward, we should get a better idea of what the actual split will be like between them. The last guy in my top 30 is going to be Melvin Gordon going up against Las Vegas. Pretty easy matchup, but this offense has been one of the worst in the league, and they use like 3 different running backs. Melvin Gordon technically is a starter, but it's really hard to rely on him any single week. This is a matchup, though, where they should be fine and should be able to score some points, so going to be some opportunity for him here, but I'm not too excited about playing him. Now, some other guys outside of the 30 who could be in consideration, obviously like Kenyon Drake and Gus Edwards. We're going to just have to monitor this situation going forward and see if Gus Edwards is playing and what they say about the snap share. So I'm not going to have them ranked up really in here until we have more of an idea. Also, obviously, James Robinson is interesting because we talked about with Carter. Could be taking over and getting some more work, but we'll just have to see. AJ Dillon also looked a little bit better last week, so I think mentioning him and Jarrell Henderson should both be in consideration, but not too excited about any of his options down here. But I just wanted to mention them so I can kind of cover all my bases. But yeah, there's my top 30. Let me know if you guys got any questions about them, questions about other sit starts. My wide receiver video did come out earlier, so check out that if you haven't yet. My quarterback and tight end rankings will be coming out after that, so stay tuned for those. I'll see y'all later.